really don't have much more to add. Thank you very much. But I know that Clarence Davis, as an elected official and as a community leader, has made a big difference with everybody that lives in the city of Baltimore and beyond. You all know his role in helping with land value taxation legislation, but in getting this together over the past 8 months to a year, I've learned some very fascinating things, except for one thing. Why is it called Tiger? So maybe we'll find that out. I've never heard. But we had meetings where I think I found the key to why this gentleman is so special and cares so much about the world. He's traveled, and travel is, if you do it right, travel is the greatest teacher there is. And when that's followed by a knowledge of history, you can't be beat. And that's why I think we have an inspiring voice for justice, a funny voice to make us laugh, and also, when necessary, a very serious voice to whip people into shape if it has to be done. And I'd like to introduce Clarence Tiger Davis.
All right, first of all, I guess I better get to that, give you the answer as to how I received my nickname, Tiger. Because I was the Tiger before Exxon started putting it in your tank, or before Kellogg's or whomever put Tony on the box. In high school, I was a linebacker. And we had this young group of freshmen coming on. Some of us decided to stay around in the 10th grade or as sophomores and play another year on junior varsity because we didn't want to go to varsity and sit on the bench. And so these young rookies, as I call them, freshmen, had their game plan together for us. And so they had decided to, for the one-on-one blocking, they lined up according to whose position they wanted to take from us sophomores. And this big old 6'3", 225-pound rangy character who later played for the Atlanta Falcons kept counting down to me. And come to find out at the end of the day, Reginald Francis Lewis had organized all the freshmen, and they had made a decision as to whose job each one was to pursue. And so they were organized. Now, Reginald Francis Lewis, the museum is named after him. And is Avila here? Where's Avila? Oh, there he is. Yeah, there he is. Okay, Reginald Francis Lewis gave me the nickname Tiger. There was a movie out in the mid-50s called Bengal Tiger. And they had this picture of the tiger leaping out, his muscles and all. Now, I did have muscles at one day. I'm a little bit over hill right there, 75. But at any rate, they said I looked like the Bengal tiger. And so from that particular point on, I was called Tiger. But now I always tell another story too about that. I tell the story that I came up from down south, a plantation in Georgia. And, I knew what night riders were. I knew how whites treated blacks and what have you. So when I came to the city, they told me if I played football, I could hit them white boys over there and wouldn't get lynched. So I went hog wild. But at any rate, some folks will refer to me as a politician, but whenever I introduce politicians, I always refer to them as honest crooks. Now, there are some folks who get offended by that, but not I. I don't have a guilty conscience about anything, but there are some folks who get offended by that, and they would always get angry. But I'm going to tell you this little story. Two crocodiles was sitting at the side of the swamp near the lake. The smaller one turned to the bigger one and said, "I can't understand how you could be so much bigger than I. We're the same age. We were the same size as kids. I just don't get it." "Well," said the big croc, "what have you been eating?" "Politicians the same as you," replied the small croc. "Well, where do you catch them?" "Down the other side of the swamp near the parking lot by the Capitol." "Same here. How do you catch them?" "Well, I crawl up under one of their Lexus cars and wait for one to unlock the car door. Then I jump out, grab them by the leg, shake the shit out of them, and eat them." "Ah," says the big crocodile, "I think I see a problem. You're not getting any real nourishment. See, by the time you finish shaking the shit out of a politician, there's nothing left but an asshole little briefcase." So that's my little joke for the day, right? I trust there are no politicians in the house.
Not anymore.
But it's been such a pleasant week for me, and I was sitting with my mother this morning before I took her to the podiatrist, and I was sitting thinking about what had transpired. And I miss you all. I haven't had this kind of discussion in a long time. I've encountered some of the brightest and most challenging people that I've met. Chief Seattle came back to mind, and I mentioned Chief Seattle as Bill was talking about giving some of his experiences and talking about some of the characters that he knew in life. Now, Chief Seattle was always one of my favorite people in history, but I haven't even used his name in 15 or 20 years. Chief Seattle, though, how many of you ever heard of Chief Seattle? Oh, well, hell. See what I mean? I'm in good company here. You all have inspired me. You're bringing out things that have been dormant in me for quite some time. And for that, I am truly grateful. I don't consider myself as a very religious person, but I don't see myself as a deist either. But I do appreciate people I disagree with. People like H.L. Mencken. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but then there are a lot of things I agree with him on. When he talks about public education and how public education is designed to make John Doe the same as Richard Doe, and so on and so forth. It's not designed to create people who think. And they have something they call Common Core now, which is designed to do the very same thing. This is an educational system that my generation had not been accustomed to, because the whole idea of education is to make people think, to make people inquirers of new knowledge or what have you. And so today I find myself standing here inspired. But now, how are we going to do this? First of all, we got to recognize the cultural diversity that exists in the city. And perhaps the most difficult group to deal with, and the most important, is the black community. Because the black community is nearly 70% of the city. And so we have to find a way to get to them, but at the same time, maintain our vision of America. And I say maintain our vision of America is because most blacks have no idea at this particular point the whole vision that history has for America, or why we are great or should be greater than we are. Because our vision of democracy comes from the Athenians. And then it was enhanced by what we could say sometimes Egypt or before, but let's stick with the Athenians, okay? And too few of our people today look at that history or even understand that particular period of history or the real meaning of democracy. Pericles says that here in Athens, we do not imitate other people's form of government. For we have a government that we call a democracy, whereby every man, and that was the weak point, man, is equal before the law. And then he goes on to say that we do not say one who does not participate in government is one who minds his own business. We say that he has no business being here. And then he goes on to say that, you know, we encourage the development of wealth. But wealth must be properly utilized to advance human progress. And there are a lot of people who believe that. I mean, Bill Gates, look at how much money he gave out. Look at some of the other financiers who gave their money to Bill Gates. Even look at Oprah Winfrey. And before his demise, Bill Cosby. He didn't hesitate to give $30 million to Spelman College. This is how wealth was to be used. If you look at the world through the eyes of Pericles, this was in his funeral oration during the Peloponnesian Wars when you know, they were hit with that plague. Then he goes on and he says that there is no shame to be in poverty. The only shame is in not taking practical measures to escape poverty. Now, Pericles defines democracy unlike anyone else I've ever known. Because, you know, the one thing about the Greeks were somewhat scientific, or I should say the Athenians, they were somewhat scientific in their approach to life. They did not look at religion, rely upon religion as some folks or some societies did. Then we move forward. And this is when our value system begins to take shape here in America. We look at people like Thomas Hobbes, and you know, they all talked about some kind of social contract. But Hobbes, who believed, you know, that, hey, you gotta have a king, you know, kind of like the philosopher king of Aristotle, you gotta have a king or a dictator or someone to make these things work or to make society work. But what he says is that man existed in an unruly, individualistic state of nature. And that in order to move things forward, there had to be that philosopher king type or something to make that work. Well, you go on and you take a look at Rousseau and Voltaire and others. And they would have similar ideas about their social contract. In fact, I think it was Rousseau would say that wherever I go, man is still in chains. Well, if we look at things today, we may not be in chains physically, but we are in chains mentally. Because, getting back to Macon, the public education system has programmed us to be little widgets and we can all be the same. The educational system that many of us came through, and I came through a totally black one, where they threw crumbs at us and just keep quiet. But along the way, we were being taught to be thinkers. And we were taught to understand that history is written by the conqueror. And if you're from India and you look at history, you know, you're talking about a British version of history. If you're in America, you're talking about a combination of British and European history. Because certainly the Indians could very clearly see that America committed genocide against the Native Americans, but we never use that term when we talk about America, now do we? We never talk about that. But when you came up through a black educational system, as we did, we saw things as they were. And we were strong enough by 1960 whereby we could take on America as young men. and women. And I say women, and I mean that too, because the sisters is badder than the brothers now, I'm gonna tell you. I would never want to tangle with any of the sisters I used to work with back in the day, okay? But at any rate, we took on America. We exposed the deficiencies in this democracy. And we exposed them to the world. We took a beating and we lost a lot of people. But the one thing that came out of this was an understanding that no matter what we did in the 60s and what have you, we can attribute that to our fathers who had fought in World War II, who had seen the world, and who had seen America through different eyes. And so we had a new generation of blacks in America who would not accept the humiliation of second-class citizenship. Now, that particular group had to go against the group of leaders before that. You know, they had to take or wrest control from that particular group. And then there were others who fell by the wayside that you and I should remember. Those who worked with the progressives in 1948. We should remember them. We should never forget Paul Robeson and people like Paul Robeson, because these people gave so much and they made so many sacrifices. Paul Robeson was the first to come out to ban the bomb. He was first to come out to say, hey, we should not be afraid of the Soviet Union. We should reach out and clasp hands with the Soviet Union and move our nation forward. So Paul Robeson, despite all that he did for America during the World War II period, was thrown under the bus by the nation because he became too big for his britches. He became too big for his britches. And so we are thankful for Paul Robeson. But then my generation, we had a guy by the name of Dr. Benjamin Mays out of Atlanta University. Dr. Benjamin Mays, and as kids, we all knew who he was. We knew who he was. He was president of Atlanta University, and we knew when he said, do not blame your environment.
That's pretty good.
As young people, you all have choices. And the choices you make will determine what happens to you in life. So you must be prepared to make the right choices. Today, in this homogenized world, you know, we make excuses for everything that young people do. There's some kind of sociological reason. Let's take him to see the psychiatrist, why he needs a counselor, a therapist, so on and so forth. He needs his ass whipped. Excuse my language. He needs some discipline. Because, you know, number one, from birth forward, you should have been training that child to take his place in society. But the family structure has broken down. And so we see that. And we must act on that. And when you come to my age, and this is one of the reasons we have to begin to step forward again, Josh, is because nothing will change in this city as long as we just simply change black faces for white faces. Because the blacks go in and they do the same thing that those before them did. We have a crisis in this city where we are producing the mass executioners of our society, our children. And our children were once our future. Now they have become the mass executioners of our society. No one wants to talk about it. If you bring the issue up in the black community, let's take teen pregnancy for instance. The first thing out of black folks' leadership mouth is, well, white folks having just as many babies out of wedlock. Hey, come on now, that ain't what I'm talking about. Just because this happens in the white community. See, their minds have been trapped by racism. And they're viewing the world through the prism of race. This is why in our Black Veterans Organization, we talk about the need to move beyond race. We fought in the jungles in Vietnam with white dudes, and they was our brothers. Now, we have a lot of differences, but they are our brothers. And they have never had the experience of living within a black community or understanding, what goes down in black institutions. But we have a responsibility to teach them. And what we say in our community, in our black veterans community, is that we must overcome pointing the fingers at others and begin to engage in introspective analysis. Because if I say, you're the reason I'm in this plight, that means that you are my master. And I refuse to accept anyone as my master. And this is where we are in the African American Black Veterans Movement. We refuse to blame anybody else. Yes, there may be factors out there that contribute to our demise. But we are responsible for ourselves. And we are the master of our destiny. And once you get to that particular point, then you can truly begin to feel free. And that's, once again, is where we are. And we look at our white brothers from now. How can we expect them, once again, to understand how we view the world? We had problems back in the 70s when we were all in colleges. We had an organization called NACD, and we was working together as brothers. And what happened is, when we would bring issues to the table that were peculiar to the African American community, our blue-eyed, light-skinned brothers would say, oh, come on, man, now y'all go with that race again, man. Let's stop talking about that race. We all brothers. And they meant that. But we had difficulty accepting that as blacks because we refuse to see the world through their eyes. And so where we are at this particular point, we are open to viewing the world through all eyes. This is one of the reasons, once again, I was so happy to see my young friend Andy Pierre here, because he's young and bright. And he can be taught. He can learn. Some of our community, we're too old to learn. Because that whole thing about you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's kind of true with people, Once they've gotten to a certain point, they cannot see the world in any other way. They will stand and talk about the white community or Europeans or blame whites for everything. But then that's the way they have been programmed to view it, because they've been programmed to understand that they are the servant class and that whites are the masters, and therefore whites are responsible for everything that's wrong in our community. We refuse to accept that. We can be the masters. White folks are coming into our community impregnating our girls. Whites are not coming into our community selling drugs. Yeah, we don't have any boats or airplanes or ships to bring it in, but we got children that sell dope and children that use dope. That is what we're supposed to be in control of, our community. You see, and so, but as long as we can blame somebody else for it, then we're comfortable. But that's a slave mentality. But those of us who have been across this world, who have seen the world through all eyes, we have come home to try to bring about a new day. And I know that what you all have discussed this week is a viable solution to many of our problems. It may not be popular in this particular city at this particular time, but you have scratched the surface of intellect of at least 3 people I know of. Nina is one, and she's coming on board along with Andy and what we call her Tiny. She was down here as well. And the brother from West Baltimore, the one that went to Evanston High School, we're going to pull him in. And by the time we get past Veterans Day, we will have an organization, whether we call it the Georgist organization or by some other name. The mission will still
Some
be
other name.
the same. Some other name. Some other name. the mission will still be the same. Because we believe right now, this is the right time. This is the right time. No better time than now. Because progressives are on the move, because the others have given us a moral imperative to move forward. And so that's one thing we can thank Trump and all them other Trumpites for, is they have given us a moral imperative to move forward. This is why Jealous won the election here, a progressive from Bernie Sanders. This is why, what's his name, Gillum won that election, and they may not win the general election. But the voices of justice, economic justice, the voices of reason are winning out. The issue for those of us like myself who know the truth about what's going on, will we stand up or will we go along with the status quo? And so I can say to you today that I don't even have time enough to think otherwise other than moving forward. I'll be 76 in about 3 weeks. I don't have much time left. So my only alternative is to fight like hell until we achieve something, okay? And that's what you can count on. We are positioned in this city whereby we have nowhere else to get revenues from. And we must begin to stand forward and resist these crazy taxes that they come up with, like bottle taxes and all that other kind of stuff. Or like the speed cameras or the other cameras they got all over the city. They catch us because we didn't stop long enough before making that right turn, despite the fact you could see 2 blocks down that nothing was coming. It's all about getting money. And every tax they come up with is a regressive tax that takes food off the table of the poorest people. We need some alternatives. It is our job, those who have experienced what you all have experienced this week, those of us like Anita, to stand forward and begin to conduct our small discussion sessions across the city and the churches and the community organizations. We must bring in people like Josh, or some of our friends from down in the DC metro area. We must bring them in so that they can talk. The literature that I picked up was good literature, you know, which real simplistic, explain everything. I was reading over it last night, and I said, well, dang, I could make copies of this and distribute it and have little work sessions. But now we must go even beyond that. We must challenge some of the professors at some of the institutions in the city. Now, and not just the black institutions, but one of the most radical institutions of the 60s was Johns Hopkins University. I mean, that's an institution where there's a lot of opportunity for intellectual engagement. Loyola might be a little different because it's Catholic, you know, and that's a little more control or what have you. But places like University of Maryland, all we need is one person who belongs to a particular organization, and they can host a conference on that particular campus. And we now have the know-how or the names of people we can reach out to who can come and be the experts on site. But these are engagements and conversations that we must have in the city of Baltimore. We're going to start here, and then we're going to try to expand out. But we've got to get us a solid foundation here. And there are many ways we can do that, because we can put it to referendum is just a simple opportunity for us to get out and talk to people about it. So that's, you know, we've kind of discussed a couple of these things. How do we get that word out there? We got to bring some discussion on it. And we also have to have some candidates who are bold enough to get out there to talk about it without being afraid of the label of socialists or whatever they want to call us. You know, we are human beings, we're humanists, and we're looking for a better life for everyone. And besides, God didn't give a certain group of people the right to have all the land, but they took it from somebody, didn't it? Chief Seattle said the land belonged to all of us. How can you buy or sell land? How can you buy or sell the air? Or the sweet metal scent in the air. How do you sell that? That is impossible. So I want to thank you for inviting me here. I want to thank you for hearing me, and I want to thank you more than anything for the inspiration that you have given me. And we will begin this week because the journey begins with the first step. And the first step is pull together, even if it's only 5 or 6. We're going to pull that group together within the next couple of weeks. And then after Veterans Day, we're going to begin the work in honors. For those of you who believe in God, may God bless each and every one of you. Those who do not,
Good luck.
may the force be with you.
That was something. Yes,
In the film business, you say printed.
that's a take. And
Printed.
so I certainly pledge, and I know the rest of us pledge to do whatever we can in whatever capacities we have to help this wonderful city that helped protect American independence from Great Britain at Fort McHenry. I don't know if any of you went to visit. And nothing personal, David, but you drive on the wrong side. But we're going to give a pledge to work for people that have so much to offer to the world as the people of Baltimore. Thank you. And Dan has a few comments now.
As I was coming over here, Gib whispered in my ear that Schaukenbach is going to give Clarence a 3-volume set of Henry George's works. He probably already has Henry George's works, but these might be, are these the annotated? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay, well, he doesn't have the annotated set. I wanted to thank Clarence for a couple of reasons. One, when I spoke earlier, I said at the business meeting, I said, the activists I have talked to said, a good conference starts by explaining the problems, then gets into the theory and the solutions, and then gets into action. And Clarence obviously understood that because he came here and was the very first speaker, talked about the problems. And he closed by talking about action. And that's the mentality we all have to have. He mentioned the Greeks, their disdain for people who do not participate in civic affairs, who keep to themselves. And that inspired me, and I checked on Wikipedia to make sure I wasn't speaking out of my own often incorrect imagination. But the word for self is id, right? You know what the Greek word was for a person who does not participate in civic affairs but only is focused on himself? Idiot. Idiot. So, one thing we can all say is there's no idiots in this room. At least not in the original sense. The other thing, and I was going to talk about this tomorrow, but since Clarence is here, one of the things that I was at one of these big psychological uplifting events, not Warner Earhart, but somebody else like that. And they said, don't be a victim. And somebody in the group got up and said, they said, you never have to be a victim. And he said, what about Anne Frank, who's living in an attic and the Nazis are marching downstairs? And I thought about that, and I thought about that, and I thought about that. when you read her diary, sometimes she falls into deep despair. And when she falls into deep despair, she's a victim. When she gets out of deep despair and says, no matter how bad my life is, I'm going to do what I can do and I'm going to make the best of it, then she's not a victim. And what I heard from Clarence is no matter what you do to us, we are not going to be victims. And what I hear from people on the left, especially white liberals, is they pull in people they've decided are oppressed, and they make victims of them. They tell them, you cannot succeed until the socialist revolution or whatever they have in mind comes and liberates you. You have to be liberated by us. And that's what you're telling them. They're saying, you're a victim, and we are your rescuer. And what I hear Clarence is saying is, get out of my way because I'm not a victim. And we will do what we can do, and we will save ourselves. And that's exactly the mentality that I think we need to look for people with that mentality. And so I thank Clarence for that as well. Thank you, Clarence.
Clarence said he wanted to hear another one of your songs.
A song.
A song.
Who said that?
Clarence.
Hey, Clarence, did you say that? If Clarence verifies that he said that, I'll do it, but I'm not.
Tell him, Clarence.
Yeah, tell him yes.
Dear none for how we love thee, our hearts and souls are thine, ever true and Lord you guide us. That's my high school song. But guess what? None of the kids for the past 25 years know the damn song. And that shows you how things have changed in all that time. Because Dunbar High School is the heart and soul of East Baltimore. And on September the 21st, we will have what we call our Golden D Awards. And we will begin to bring forth some free people. Okay, Jim Norfleet.
Go to the microphone.
Okay, Jim Norfleet. He was one of the guys that played in sports with me in high school. He and my brother graduated together a couple of years ahead of me. Jim Norfleet was in charge of all the scientists worldwide for Colgate-Palmolive Oral Division. His first major patent was Ultra Bright toothpaste. And I think that mouth rinse, Peroxol or something like that, they were his first major patents. He's been around the world twice. Now check him out. He graduates, goes to University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. Oh, and by the way, he was inspired by Reginald Lewis's uncle to do that, who was a pharmacist, to do that. He faced all kinds of racism there. And of course it was expensive, so when the draft notice came, he happily went on in the military, then he came home, paid his way through school, and then he graduated in 1967, and from that point on, he was with Colgate-Palmolive Oral Division. That's what I mean by free people, people who become master of their own destiny. Or Jake, what we call him Jake the Rattlesnake, Benjamin. He was a chopper pilot in Vietnam. When they went to chopper pilot school, they were told, look, hey, but 2 blacks gonna get through here. You know, I mean, they set that quota. This was back in '63. They set the quota. Jakey became one of them and became one of the best helicopter pilots, and then he came home, started flying fixed-wing aircraft, and then he ended up being in charge of aviation for General Electric's West Coast Division. And I'm only talking about football players as such, okay? So when we, you know, in football, we're supposed to be dummies, right? We're supposed to be jocks. But then when you look at those who went to medical school, who were athletes, this is what came out of the black school system, which was destroyed by integration. Because once you integrate, you cannot talk about Benjamin Mays and what he said to black students, or you cannot talk about Du Bois's messages or about his talent intent from a cultural perspective. And so these things we lost once integration was there, because character was a major thing for us. Character, character, character. You got to have character. And so there was no difference between what we learned in church, what we learned in school, what we learned in community, or what would come our way from any adult within our community, because we always had to respect our elders. Even if they were only 2 or 3 years older, you had to respect the elders. And all of those things, we've lost our culture, and we have become a diffused culture, trapped between who we once were, and we keep fighting for that, you know, like blackness and all of that, we keep fighting for it. But yet we are trapped between that and trying to be what Master wants us to be. And so at some point, we're going to break the yoke of mental slavery and move forward and become a real people once again. Thank you.
Ask Jan to sing the national anthem.
Robert Schackenbach has embarked upon a multi-year project to publish the works of Henry George. Henry George was a scholar, he was an activist. Clarence Davis is a scholar and an activist. It's only right, just, and moral that we should pass on to him the first 3 volumes of Henry George's work. So I'll turn this over to Mark, who will make the presentation.
Okay. This actually, Henry George has been published, and we keep all his books in print. But these are annotated by scholars. And you heard 2 of those scholars this morning, Jim Dawsey and Alex Blau. And we've got 3 more volumes to go. It'll be about 1 volume a year. I know David Triggs and the Henry George Foundation of Great Britain are also helping us to get these out, particularly to scholars and policymakers. We realize that they're pricey books, but the value is, in addition to Henry George's own original words, is the annotations and the introductions, which gives you the context and explains the references. And you know, after hearing that talk about the Athenians and Pericles, etc., I mean, I remember in Progress and Poverty, George makes lots of references to history. So I think we are putting these in very good hands, and I hope Clarence will make good use of them, and it was a pleasure to give them to you on behalf of Robert Schackenbach Foundation.
No, I don't need it. I've said enough. Thank you.
Next.
Well, come on, Dan.
Did you ever know Paul Robeson Jr.?
Yes.
Is he
Well,
alive?
I think that's it. Normally we tell you to go up to hospitality now, but we don't have hospitality. Thanks to the guy who gave Samu a strange hot plate and an even stranger frying pan. So socialize, have a good time. I think I think the bar that was out here is closed, but the regular bar is so close we probably didn't need this bar. So, you know, you can bring drinks into here or go out to the bar or whatever you want, but have a good time, and I will see you tomorrow morning.
Open mic's at 8:30 and
Oh.
open mic at 8:30.